Retro Road Test, the Capri vs the Fuego, a 1984 road test. Introduction, a clash of styles. The year is 1984. Britain is still coming to terms with compact discs, shoulder pads, and the strange feeling that computers are starting to do more than just play chess badly. In the motoring world, the Ford Capri is still very much alive, clinging on as the self-styled car you always promised yourself. It's the archetypal British boulevard bruiser, with a hint of flashiness, and a boot large enough for a weekend's worth of market stall merchandise. Meanwhile, Renault, never shy of a bold flourish, introduced the Fuego to Britain in 1981 as its futuristic coupe. Where the Capri leaned on retro muscle appeal, the Fuego arrived with its aerodynamic nose, wraparound rear window, and the sort of dashboard plastics that looked like they'd been nicked from a prototype spaceship. So here we are in 1984, putting these two very different takes on the European coupe against each other. On paper they occupy similar territory, two-door, four-seat, reasonably affordable sporty-ish cars. But under the skin, they couldn't be further apart. Let's see how they stack up. The contenders, specs at a glance. Ford Capri 2.8 injection, UK, 1984. Engine, 2.8-litre V6, Bosch K-Jetronic fuel injection. Power, 160 bhp. Torque, 162 pound-feet. 0-60 miles per hour, around 7.9 seconds. Top speed, 130 miles per hour. Transmission, 5-speed manual. Weight, -1,170 kg. Price new, £9,000. Renault Fuego GTX 2.0, UK, 1984. Engine, 2.0-litre inline-4, fuel injected. Power, 110 bhp. Torque, 119 pound-feet. 0-60 miles per hour, around 10.5 seconds. Top speed, 118 miles per hour. Transmission, 5-speed manual. Weight, -1,080 kg. Price new, £8,000. On raw numbers alone, the Capri has the clear advantage in performance. But specs don't tell the whole story. Renault's pitch was that the Fuego would be the intelligent man's coupe, with Gallic flair, modern aerodynamics, and better fuel economy. The Capri, by contrast, wasn't trying to be clever, it was trying to be desirable in a more obvious, pub car park sort of way. Styling, flash vs futuristic. Let's start with what you see when you pull the curtains back in the morning. The Capri still looks every inch the mini-muscle car, even in 1984. Long bonnet, short tail, a profile that could pass for Detroit at 10 paces, and plenty of chrome detailing left over from the 1970s. Ford's designers knew their market. This is a car for young men with aviator sunglasses and an impressive collection of leather jackets. Even the badge, 2.8 injection, is designed to impress the neighbors, who will no doubt assume it's something out of Formula One. The Fuego, by contrast, looks like it was beamed in from the set of Tomorrow's World. It's all about the sloping hatchback rear, the aerodynamic nose, and that curious black plastic rubbing strip running the full length of the body, which looks suspiciously like a bumper that got lost on its way to the correct place. It's modern, yes, but in a distinctly French way. Some say avant-garde, others mutter odd. In Britain, it raised a few eyebrows, and not always in admiration. If the Capri looks like a car you'd take to a nightclub car park in Essex, the Fuego looks like a car you'd take to a wine tasting in Lyon. Both, however, make statements. Interior, leather jackets vs Gauloises packets. Inside, the difference in philosophy is even more stark. The Capri's cabin is functional and reasonably comfortable. The dash is pure Ford, lots of square buttons, simple gauges, and seats that are just about supportive if you don't corner too hard. The driving position is a bit knees up, as if Ford borrowed it from a transit van, but you quickly get used to it. Ergonomics were not a Ford strong point, but at least everything works. The Fuego, meanwhile, offers something altogether more daring. Renault tried to sell the idea that this was a designer interior. There are swooping shapes, funky ventilation controls, and a dashboard that wouldn't look out of place in a sci-fi film where everyone wears silver jumpsuits. Comfort levels are high, with softer seats than the Capri and better all-round visibility thanks to the wraparound glass. On the downside, the plastics feel about as durable as a Christmas cracker toy, and many British buyers soon discovered that Renault Electrics had a talent for randomly retiring from service. In terms of space, the Fuego's hatchback gives it an edge in practicality. You can actually carry a surprising amount of luggage in the back, and the rear seats fold down flat. The Capri's boot is large, but awkwardly shaped, and rear passengers might find their knees somewhere near their ears. On the road, the driving experience. Capri. Turn the key and the Capri's Cologne V6 burbles into life with a low growl. It's the sort of noise that makes grown men in pub car parks nod approvingly. Out on the road, the Capri is quick, genuinely quick for its day. The 2.8 injection pulls strongly through the gears, and thanks to Bosch fuel injection, throttle response is sharp compared to the old carburetor models. Handling, though, is a mixed bag. The Capri uses a live rear axle, which in wet weather has about as much grip as a greased pig on a linoleum floor. Enthusiasts call this character. Nervous drivers call it terrifying. On a dry B road it's fun, predictable, and tail-happy. On a wet roundabout it's best described as sideways. Still, that's part of the charm. The Capri feels alive, eager, slightly dangerous. Exactly what its owners wanted. Fuego. Slip into the Fuego, light up the inline 4, and the experience is less dramatic. The 2.0 injection engine is smooth enough, but it lacks the brawny soundtrack of the Capri. Performance is brisk but not thrilling, more warm hatch than sports coupe. Where the Fuego scores points is in refinement. It rides better than the Capri, feels more stable in the corners, and the steering has a precision that the Ford rather lacks. It's a car you could happily drive from Dover to Marseille without developing a permanent limp. But for all its balance and composure, the Fuego doesn't stir the soul in quite the same way. It's a bit too sensible, a bit too clinical. Driving one, you feel like you should be wearing a polo neck and talking about literature, rather than a bomber jacket and talking about darts. Performance and economy. The numbers make the contrast stark. The Capri 2.8 injection is faster, full stop. 0-60 in under 8 seconds is still respectable, and in 1984 it was properly quick. Top speed of 130 miles per hour meant it could hold its own on the German Autobahn, at least until a Porsche 944 came along to embarrass it. Fuel consumption, however, is heavy. Driven gently you might see 20–25 miles per gallon, but give it the beans and you'll be lucky to scrape 18. The Fuego 2.0 GTX injection is slower, but significantly more frugal. Around 30 miles per gallon was realistic, which in the days before unleaded petrol and catalytic converters counted for something. Performance is perfectly adequate for everyday use, but anyone expecting fireworks would be disappointed. So it's a classic battle of brawn versus brains. Reliability and build quality. This is where things get interesting. The Capri was built in Germany by Ford Cologne, and while not immune to rust, what car of the 1980s was, it was generally solid and dependable. Parts were plentiful, every backstreet garage knew how to fix them, and they rarely went wrong in a catastrophic fashion. The Fuego, however, developed something of a reputation in Britain, and not always a good one. French electrics in the 1980s were a gamble, and many Fuegos developed eccentricities after a few winters. Switchgear failed, dashboards rattled, and rust found its way into the sills and arches faster than you could say Zatalis. Renault's dealer network wasn't as strong as Ford's in the UK either, which meant that when things did break, owners sometimes struggled to get them fixed without selling a kidney. Image and ownership. The Capri's image in Britain was, and still is, unmistakable. It was the car of choice for every white boy, Essex lad, and young executive who wanted to look like they'd made it. It starred in TV shows like The Professionals and Minder, giving it street cred far beyond its mechanical reality. Even in 1984, with hot hatches starting to steal its thunder, the Capri had an aura. The Fuego, meanwhile, was never embraced in quite the same way. In France it was reasonably popular, but in Britain it remained niche. To many, it was seen as slightly pretentious, the sort of car bought by someone who wore pastel jumpers over their shoulders and said actually, we're off to the Dortdom this summer. It wasn't that the Fuego was bad, it just never captured the public imagination the way the Capri did. Living with them. If you wanted a car that made every drive an event, the Capri was your pick. It wasn't the most comfortable, nor the most practical, but it made you feel good. It was a car that shouted "Look at me" even if the neighbors rolled their eyes. The Fuego, on the other hand, was a car you could genuinely live with day in, day out. Comfortable, refined, practical, and reasonably economical, it was the more rational choice. Unfortunately, rational isn't what sells coupes. Verdict, head vs heart. So which one wins? On paper, the Renault Fuego GTX makes a strong case. It's more practical, more comfortable, more economical, and more modern. For many drivers, it would have been the better everyday car. But the truth is that coupes are not bought with the head. They're bought with the heart, and the Capri had heart in spades. It was faster, more exciting, and had an image that's only grown in legend. In 1984, if you wanted a car that made you feel like the star of a gritty ITV drama, you bought the Capri. If you wanted a car that made you feel like a philosophy lecturer on sabbatical in Nice, you bought the Fuego. Both have their merits, but in the cold light of history, the Capri is the one people remember fondly. Epilogue, the road ahead. By the late 1980s, both the Capri and the Fuego were on borrowed time. The hot hatch revolution had arrived, and suddenly a Golf GTI or a Peugeot 205 GTI gave you all the performance of a coupe with the practicality of a hatchback. By 1986, the Capri was retired, leaving a generation misty-eyed. The Fuego soldiered on a little longer in Europe but never really carved its niche. Today, the Capri is a bona fide classic, with enthusiasts paying good money for tidy 2.8 injections. The Fuego, meanwhile, has all but vanished from British roads, remembered mainly by die-hard Francophiles and lovers of the obscure. And perhaps that says it all.